What happens when daytime TV's most polished host faces off against one of the most polarizing guests in recent memory? When Mark Consuelos welcomed Meghan Markle onto the set, the producers expected a charming, smooth interview. Instead, they got a verbal chess match that had the audience shifting in their seats. From the moment Meghan's smile turned into a measured smirk and Mark's easygoing tone sharpened, it was clear this conversation was headed somewhere no one had planned. What followed wasn't just an interview, it was a slow-burn clash of wit, pride, and control that no one in that studio will ever forget. The bright lights of the Live with Kelly and Mark studio glowed with a warm, inviting hue that morning, the audience buzzing with anticipation. The guest list had been kept under wraps until the very last minute, which only amplified the excitement when the doors opened and Meghan Markle stepped onto the stage. She wore a tailored ivory dress that seemed designed to whisper elegance, while announcing status in the same breath. The applause was instant, loud, and for a moment, she appeared every bit the poised and gracious public figure her admirers envisioned. Mark Consuelos, sitting comfortably beside Kelly Ripa, leaned forward in welcome. "Meghan Markle, great to have you here," he said warmly, extending a hand. Meghan accepted the handshake but didn't linger. Her fingers slipped away almost immediately, her smile polite but faintly guarded. Kelly, ever the crowd charmer, added, "We were just saying backstage how exciting it is to have you with us this morning, and I have to say, your entrance got the loudest applause of the week." "Really?" Meghan tilted her head slightly, almost as if confirming a fact she had already assumed. "Well, that's nice to hear. I do tend to get that reaction." The comment drew a ripple of awkward laughter from the audience, though Kelly quickly moved things along. "So Meghan, you've been in the headlines quite a bit lately, new projects, travels, charity work." "Yes," Meghan interrupted, her tone smoothing into something almost rehearsed. "I've been working on initiatives that matter deeply to me. It's not just about public appearances or whatever narrative people want to run with. It's about creating change." She glanced toward the cameras, letting the words hang for effect before adding, "And honestly, I think people are finally starting to understand that." Mark nodded, offering her the space to elaborate. "You've mentioned in previous interviews that you feel misunderstood in the media. Do you think these new projects are helping to shift that perception?" Meghan crossed her legs, the delicate rustle of fabric the only sound for a moment. "If I'm being candid, I don't think I owe anyone a perception shift. I've lived my life authentically, and if people can't see that, that's not really my burden to carry. But," she gave a thin smile, "I suppose the work I'm doing speaks for itself." Kelly and Mark exchanged a brief glance, not quite sure whether to challenge the remark or let it stand. Kelly chose the latter, moving toward lighter territory. "Well, we've heard you've been spending some time in New York. How's that been?" "It's been fine," Meghan replied, the word drawn out ever so slightly, as though grading the city on an unspoken scale. "New York has its charms, though I find it a bit chaotic. I'm used to a certain balance, and here it's different." A few murmurs rose from the crowd, half amused, half unsettled. Meghan didn't seem to notice, or perhaps she didn't care. Instead, she shifted the conversation herself. "But let's not focus on where I am. Let's focus on why I'm here." The pivot was abrupt enough that even Mark blinked. "All right, so tell us why you're here," he said, keeping his voice even. Meghan leaned forward slightly. "I'm here to talk about my new lifestyle brand. It's more than just products. It's a way of living. It's about mindfulness, intention, and creating an environment that reflects the highest version of yourself." Kelly smiled, but it was the kind of smile that hosts use when they know they're treading on potentially slippery ground. "Sounds fascinating. And will this be available worldwide or—" "Oh, eventually," Meghan said, waving a hand. "But I believe in exclusivity at the start. Not everything should be for everyone. It's about curating an experience for people who truly get it." The choice of words landed heavily. Some audience members raised their eyebrows, while others stayed silent, absorbing the implication. Mark decided to test the waters. "So you're saying your brand is for a certain kind of person?" Meghan's lips curved into a subtle smile. "Well, let's be honest, Mark. Not everyone values quality over quantity, and I'm not in the business of lowering standards to appeal to the masses." The air shifted. Kelly shifted in her seat. The studio's warmth now carried a trace of something else. Tension. Trying to steer things back to neutral territory, Kelly said, "Well, we'll definitely talk more about your brand. But first, we've got to ask, you've had quite the journey from acting to royal life to entrepreneurship. Looking back, is there anything you would have done differently?" Meghan's gaze didn't waver. "I wouldn't change a thing. Every choice I made was the right one at the time. People can speculate, judge, or twist my story, but I'm still here. And not everyone who criticizes me can say the same about their own lives." The remark was sharp enough to slice through the polite atmosphere. The audience gave a collective pause. No one laughed this time. Kelly gave a small, almost imperceptible inhale before saying, "Well, on that note, we'll take a short break and be right back with Meghan Markle." The cameras cut, but the moment lingered. Meghan's posture remained flawless, yet her eyes held the unmistakable glint of someone prepared to keep control, no matter how uncomfortable the room became. When the cameras returned from commercial break, the mood in the Live with Kelly and Mark studio was subtly but unmistakably altered. The applause was still there, but a touch more tentative, as if the audience had sensed the undercurrents from before the break and wasn't sure what to expect next. Kelly Ripa, ever the professional, launched it straight into the next segment with her signature brightness. We're back with Meghan Markle, talking about her new lifestyle brand, her journey, and the many hats she's worn throughout her career. Mark Consuelos added, "And we wanted to touch on something that's been in the headlines a lot, your take on the public's perception of you. You've said before that you're not particularly concerned with winning over everyone. That's a bold stance in today's media climate." Meghan folded her hands neatly on her lap, her expression poised. "Well, Mark, I've learned the hard way that if you spend your life trying to please everyone, you'll end up pleasing no one, least of all yourself. I'm not here to run a popularity contest. I'm here to live my truth and to do work that matters." Her voice was calm, but there was a faint edge to it, a sharpness that cut through the studio's otherwise polished veneer. Kelly tilted her head, choosing her words carefully. "But surely there's some value in meeting people halfway, finding common ground?" Meghan's smile was tight. "Common ground only works if both sides are willing to stand on it. And quite frankly, I've been on the receiving end of enough selective narratives to know that some people don't want common ground. They want control." Mark leaned back slightly, sensing the temperature in the room rising. "So you feel the media has tried to control your story?" "I don't feel it, Mark," Meghan replied, her tone suddenly firm. "I know it. There have been outright falsehoods printed about me, and instead of being given the benefit of the doubt, I was expected to remain silent, to smile and let it slide. That's not strength, that's compliance, and I'm done complying." The audience gave a low, collective murmur. Some nodded in approval, others simply exchanged glances. Kelly attempted to lighten things. I think people might be surprised to hear you be this candid. You've been portrayed," Meghan interrupted. "Portrayed as what? Difficult? Ambitious? The same adjectives that would be considered admirable for a man are somehow threatening when applied to me." She turned slightly toward the crowd, adding, "It's not a coincidence, and we all know it." There was a beat of silence. Mark's expression was neutral, but his eyes studied her closely. "So is that part of why your brand is positioned the way it is? For people who, you believe, get it?" Meghan gave him a pointed look. "I'm not building my work for people who are committed to misunderstanding me. If that sounds selective, so be it. Excellence is selective." Kelly adjusted her posture, her voice still warm but edged with caution. Some might hear that and say you're closing yourself off to broader audiences." Meghan's reply was instant. "Maybe those audiences need to raise their standards." A sharp inhale swept through the audience like a gust. The words had landed hard, whether as an empowering challenge or a subtle insult depended entirely on the listener's perspective. Mark cleared his throat. "Well, let's pivot for a moment. You've been in the public eye for years now, acting, philanthropy, royal life. What's the most misunderstood thing about you?" Meghan didn't hesitate. "That I need public approval to validate my existence. I don't. I never have. I've been in rooms where every single person underestimated me, and I walked out having outshined them all. That's not arrogance. That's just fact. The air between her and the hosts tightened. Kelly forced a light laugh, but it didn't reach her eyes. Well, confidence is important. It's not confidence, Meghan said flatly. It's knowing your worth. And if people mistake that for arrogance, that's their issue, not mine. The audience reaction was split, half clapping, half silent. Mark glanced toward Kelly in a silent exchange that television hosts master over years. Do we push or do we let it go? Kelly opted for a softer question. All right, so tell us about this highest version of your self-philosophy your brand promotes. What does that look like in everyday life? Meghan's tone softened slightly, but her words still carried weight. It's about intentional living, curating your space, your relationships, your habits to reflect the person you aspire to be. It's not about pandering. It's about setting boundaries so that only the right energy enters your life. Mark's brow lifted just slightly. Boundaries are good, but in public life, they can be tricky, right? You still have to engage. Meghan gave a small shrug. Engagement is optional, and so is access. Again, the remark hung in the air, heavier than the smile that followed it. Kelly, sensing they were nearing another flashpoint, steered toward commercial. Well, Meghan, we're going to take another quick break, but when we come back, we'll talk about some of your upcoming collaborations and maybe a little bit about your life away from the cameras. Meghan's gaze flickered with a knowing glint, half amusement, half warning. If it's interesting enough. The music swelled, the camera panned out, and as the screen faded to black, the audience could feel it. This interview was no longer a warm morning chat. It was becoming something far more tense, maybe even explosive. When the cameras came back on, there was no mistaking the shift in energy. The smiles were tighter, the pauses between questions just a beat longer than they should have been. The Live with Kelly and Mark audience sat forward in their seats, sensing that what was coming next might not be part of the original script. Kelly began carefully, as though tiptoeing across a frozen lake. So Meghan, before the break we talked about boundaries, self-worth, and how you choose who gets access to you. But life in the public eye means people will still form opinions, sometimes harsh ones. Do you ever feel the need to soften your edges for the sake of public perception? Meghan leaned back, crossing one leg over the other, her posture deliberate and composed. Kelly, the only time I'll soften my edges is when it's strategically advantageous, not because it makes someone else more comfortable. If a strong woman makes people uncomfortable, that's their internal work, not mine. The audience clapped, some enthusiastically, others with a kind of cautious hesitation. Mark, who had been quietly observing, leaned forward slightly. His tone was calm but pointed. But Meghan, if you dismiss the importance of perception entirely, doesn't that risk alienating potential supporters? I mean, even great causes need allies. Meghan's smile didn't waver, but her voice sharpened. Mark, I'm not here to run a political campaign for my own likability. The allies I want are the ones who don't need to be convinced of my worth before they offer their support. Mark raised an eyebrow. That sounds exclusive. It is exclusive, Meghan said without missing a beat. Exclusivity is how you maintain standards. And if people can't handle that, maybe they weren't meant to be in my circle to begin with. The temperature in the studio seemed to climb a few degrees. Kelly shifted uncomfortably in her chair, trying to redirect. Let's talk about your collaborations then, some of the big names you're partnering with. Are you worried that your, let's call it, strong positioning might make certain brands wary? Meghan's eyes glinted. Any brand that's wary of a woman owning her narrative is not a brand I want to align with. Full stop. Mark smiled faintly, but it was the kind of smile that came before a carefully calculated jab. What about the public who says you've distanced yourself from them? That you've built a wall so high, even the people who once admired you feel shut out? Meghan tilted her head, her tone turning almost icy. Mark, the thing about walls is they're there for a reason. They keep out what doesn't belong. And if someone feels shut out, they might want to ask themselves, Was I invited in the first place? The audience reaction was immediate, gasps mixed with scattered applause. Kelly glanced toward the producers just off camera, her smile straining. Trying to smooth the edges, Kelly said, I think people might interpret that as a little harsh. Meghan's reply was swift, surgical. Harsh is telling someone to stay silent while the world invents stories about them. Harsh is smiling politely through lies so other people can stay comfortable. Compared to that, my honesty is kindness. Mark sat back, folding his arms slightly. You don't think there's any value in compromise? Compromise is fine, Meghan said evenly, when you're discussing dinner plans, not when it's about your integrity. The tension was now a living thing in the studio, settling over the audience like a heavy blanket. Kelly forced a laugh, but it cracked at the edges. Well, I think we've officially learned that Meghan Markle doesn't mince words. Meghan smiled thinly. Not when the truth works just fine. A producer off stage signaled for another commercial, and Kelly wasted no time rapping. All right, we'll take a short break and be right back. As the lights dimmed and the applause began, uneven and unsure, Mark glanced at Meghan, then at Kelly. The unspoken message was clear. This wasn't over. And when the cameras came back for the final segment, there would be no turning down the heat. The studio lights came back up for the final segment, but something was different. The air felt dense, heavy. Even the audience, who had been clapping on cue all morning, now seemed to hesitate before their applause. Kelly glanced at Mark with a look that was half warning, half challenge, as if silently asking, are you really going to go there? Mark leaned forward, voice low, but carrying the weight of a well-aimed strike. Meghan, you've talked a lot about protecting your boundaries. But what do you say to the critics who believe that's just another way of saying you've shut people out, including family? The word hung in the air like a crack of thunder. Family. It was the one topic Meghan's team had made abundantly clear before the interview. Off limits. Kelly immediately tried to cut in. Mark, I think... Meghan raised a hand slightly, silencing her without even looking. Her eyes locked on Mark. If you're asking me whether I've chosen to remove toxic influences from my life, yes. And I'll do it every time. Boundaries aren't about shutting people out. They're about keeping yourself intact. Mark didn't back down. But when the public sees you cutting ties, some wonder if you're burning bridges unnecessarily. You've built a brand on empathy and compassion. Doesn't this contradict that? Meghan's tone turned razor sharp. Empathy does not mean allowing yourself to be a doormat. Compassion does not require self-destruction. If that confuses people, perhaps they have never experienced what it takes to survive constant public and private sabotage. The audience murmured. This was no longer a polite exchange. Kelly tried again to step in. Maybe we should shift to your upcoming projects. But Mark was relentless. You've spoken about integrity. But what about accountability? Is there any part of you that thinks maybe you've played a role in some of these strained relationships? The temperature in the room spiked. Meghan's expression hardened into something almost regal in its stillness. Mark, accountability is taking ownership of your actions, not ownership of other people's lies, manipulations, or betrayals. And if you can't tell the difference, then perhaps journalism isn't the profession for you. Gasps rippled through the audience. Kelly's mouth fell slightly open, but she quickly closed it, her host instincts kicking in. All right, Meghan stood. The movement was smooth, deliberate. She adjusted her dress, glanced toward the audience, and said, I think we're done here. The studio erupted, some clapping, some shouting, all talking at once. Kelly stood too, her voice rising over the noise. Meghan, we'd love to have you back. But Meghan was already walking toward the wings, her stride unhurried, her posture unbroken. Mark sat back in his chair, expression unreadable, as the cameras struggled to follow the sudden shift. Producers waved frantically, trying to decide whether to cut to commercial or keep rolling. Ultimately, the screen faded to an awkward, extended shot of Kelly smiling tightly while Mark sat in silence, the tension still crackling like static. Outside the studio, Meghan's departure became instant headline material. Clips of the moment flooded social media within minutes, the hashtags trending globally before the hour was out. No one could agree on who won the exchange, but everyone agreed on one thing. Daytime television had just witnessed one of its most unforgettable exits. So what do you think? Was Meghan standing her ground, or did Mark hold the upper hand? Drop your thoughts in the comments below. I read every single one. And if you enjoyed this story, don't forget to hit the like button and subscribe for more unbelievable behind-the-scenes moments from the world of television. Trust me, you won't want to miss what's coming next.